Okay, I guess I'll start by saying welcome everybody, and welcome Elle-Máijá, and thanks to the Winnipeg Film Group for hosting this Q&A. My name is Amanda Kindzierski. I am Ojibwe Métis, Polish Ukrainian from Treaty 1. I'll do a quick description. I'm wearing, I have black hair tied back. I'm wearing a gray shirt with black pineapples on it. I have a Bruce Lee picture in the background, and he's saying, shh, what does it say? Shh, I'm trying to read your mind. And yeah, I'm just getting used to doing live descriptions, but I do realize why it's important. And yeah, I guess we're here today with The Meaning of Empathy writer, director, Elle-Máijá Tailfeathers. And I guess if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm so happy that the film is screening in Winnipeg. It's such a wonderful city, and I've always felt really welcome in Winnipeg. I have brown hair, it's tied back. I'm wearing red lipstick, and I'm wearing a gray wool sweater that also has, red, green, blue, and yellow stripes on it. And I'm sitting in a very white kitchen. There's no exciting stuff on the background walls. Yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. And yeah, so you're from Treaty 7?
Yeah, I'm Blackfoot from Ghana, or Kainai, which is part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and I'm also Sami from northern Norway.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk about your latest movie, I guess.
Yeah.
I will say quickly, Night Raiders was playing in TIFF when I was there this past year, and out of all the movies we tried to sneak into, that one was the hardest. They were like, every time they said a movie was sold out, it wasn't really sold out, but Night Raiders was really sold out. We were like, does anybody know anybody who worked on this film? Can we get in? Like, we got do we have some native connections here? Can we use our native phone tree? And so I will say we did get into the movie. Amazing.
Oh,
yeah. So when they were like, oh, do a Q&A with Elle-Máijá, I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And they're like, for her documentary. And I was like, oh, I guess there's you're just so busy and just creating incredible content.
Thank you.
This movie was so good. And I guess that I hadn't done much research before I started watching it and didn't realize the scope of what you had done. Can I just ask you, the people that are in the movie, did you know a lot of them beforehand? And obviously, I'm saying this knowing that your mom and your grandparents and you are in the movie. But this movie is just full of rich characters. And did you actually know a lot of these people before?
Well, thank you for all of that. I spent 5 years working on this film, and I spent roughly a year of time just researching and learning about harm reduction, and also just learning from people in my community. Like, I felt like it was really important to provide a really broad scope of voices within the community, so that both people in the community and outsiders understand that there isn't, one single experience or one single opinion, and that the issue is so complicated. And it was important for me to include as many voices as possible from people of all backgrounds from within Kainai. And so in that year of research, I spent just a lot of time sitting and talking with people and listening to them and learning about their lived experience. And often, one person would lead me to somebody else. They'd say, I don't have the answer to that, but you should talk to so-and-so. And so it was really a community-based effort in terms of just finding the people who ended up in the film. And ultimately, there's like over 50 people who appear in the film. And when I did a tally of like all of the people who participated, it was in the hundreds.
Oh wow.
So it was really, really hard to, narrow it down to even just 50 voices in the film. And so, yeah, it certainly is like a real mosaic of people from within the community.
Yeah, when I first opened the movie and I saw that it was 2 hours, I was like, oh wow, this is a movie. And then when I was watching it, I was like, I remember towards the end being like, oh no, there's only 10 minutes left. And I was like, oh no. And we haven't even heard the final kind of moments in the movie of a bunch of characters. And I was like, oh no, it's going to be text on the screen. I was like, what's going to happen? And I remember thinking, if this was a TV show, I would watch this.
Mhm.
Like, I got so invested in these people and felt so attached to them throughout this movie. I can't imagine what it was like editing it down. uh 5 years worth of work. What was that
Yeah,
process like?
it was hard. It was really hard because everybody's voice matters, and there were so many moments that didn't make it on screen that were really heartbreaking to sort of let go of in the edit suite. But it really came down to deciding, who says this one thing in, the most clear, powerful way. And it was challenging in that aspect. I worked with Hans Olsen, who edited Tasha Hubbard's last two films, Nipuestamasuin and We Will Stand Up, and Birth of a Family. And he's just a really, he has a real keen sense of story, and he's also just very, very sensitive. He's not Indigenous, but was really, really aware of, the scope of the material and his responsibility as a settler. And so we had a really great working relationship, and we spent close to a year editing. I mean, COVID really slowed things down for us, but yeah, we spent close to a year editing, and the first cut was like 5 hours long. So there was a lot. It was very challenging, and it got down to the point where it was like literally, where can we trim 1 second and where can we trim 2 seconds just to get it down to 2 hours.
Yeah, that must have been pretty incredible. um so you, over a 5 year period, because I think at one point you start uh pointing out that it's 2019, and I think towards the end it was you were already into 2020, so you had started in like 2016 doing your
Yeah,
research.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time. And so, you do you normally live in Alberta, on Treaty 7?
No, I've been based in Vancouver for quite a few years now, so I had to travel home to work on this, and it was a really wonderful experience to be able to work in my own community. So often in film, Indigenous people, we have to leave our home communities and live in these urban centers to do the work we want to do, and it was really wonderful to be able to finally go home and be able to work in my community. Um, and working on this film, and also the pandemic, really made me realize that I need to move home to my community. So that's the next step in my my life plan, is to move home to Kainai.
Yeah. Um, so, your family is in this. When your mother popped up, I was like, "Oh wow, so this is a really personal film." And then, once you start discussing your family and your grandparents, and I was like, whoo, it was a lot. And I'm just an observer. Um, what did you do to keep yourself grounded and well while doing such a personal film?
Uh, well, I I just felt really honored to be able to tell this story. Um, it was such a privilege every day to be able to go to work and film my community, just to be able to witness all of the work that is happening on the front lines. And um, there was just so much generosity in terms of people willing to share their stories. Like I was not expecting the amount of people who were willing to just share their stories. And and just be open with us and the cameras. And so I felt like, if they're willing to do what they're doing, then I should be willing to open up and also be vulnerable in front of the camera. And also, I initially didn't intend to be part of the film in that way. My mother was always going to be one of the participants in the documentary, but I didn't intend for myself and the rest of my family to be in front of the camera. But when we lost my cousin to an overdose in the second year of making this film, the material became so much more personal. And, my understanding of harm reduction took on a whole new level of importance and I guess urgency. And so I felt like it was important for me as the filmmaker, but also just as a community member, to be willing to share that aspect of my family's experience, and how we've had to grapple with the difficulty of knowing that shame and stigma around addiction is what killed my cousin. And had she had access to harm reduction services, and also had you know society as a whole, but also us as a family, maybe just if we'd been more understanding of the nature of addiction, um, and what recovery can look like, she might still be here. And so I felt like that was a necessary part of the journey for the whole story.
Yeah. It journey is a good word for the movie as well, because it was pretty hard hitting, but it was also explained very well. Like even the graphics that you use to explain your Kainai. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah,
Yeah,
and the maps and the graphics and everything, I was like, okay, I get it. I'm there. Okay, good. And I really did enjoy that. And just the explaining of how things worked, and where you guys were and all that stuff. And even the explaining of the trips to BC. Are you getting a lot of feedback from organizations from this movie at this point? I know you're just
yeah,
early into screening, but I
yeah.
right away was like, yeah, they must be like, thank goodness for this movie.
Yeah, it's been wonderful in that sense, because they're the ones doing the work on the front lines, and it's really great to have been able to support them in the work that they're doing through this film. And yeah, the film is screened for quite a few organizations, nonprofits, educational institutions, and we're working on creating our impact campaign right now. And for people who don't know what an impact campaign is, it's basically a campaign to help ensure that the film is having the reach that we want it to have, so that it's impacting the right people. And hopefully this film can help influence policy and support especially Indigenous people who live with substance use disorder, and ensure that we're changing the way that we respond to addiction.
And so, also, I'm guessing you've screened this movie for the participants who were in it.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone saw the film before it was finished. I thought it was really important for them to be, um, obviously happy with the way that they were represented. It's a huge responsibility to represent your community on screen, and an even bigger responsibility to represent people who are made vulnerable, and young people as well. So yeah, they all saw the film before it was finished, and were happy with it, which is what meant the world to me, is just knowing that they were happy with it.
Yeah. I will say, towards the end there, Mariah, and you know what? I was taking notes and I kept writing Mariah's boyfriend, so I don't remember his name.
Shay.
Uh, Shay. You go and visit them later. I was like, oh, please tell me everything's okay. Please tell me everything's okay. Um, so when you went back, I guess in 2020, uh, were you surprised at how everybody was doing? or because COVID added extra not so great thing to everybody's lives. But in the movie, I remember thinking, how did they get through this? And I was very happy that you kind of had connected with people during COVID. Can you talk a little bit about the 2020 and COVID and how that affected uh, kind of that part of the movie?
Uh, yeah. Shay actually passed away a few weeks ago or a month ago.
Oh,
I don't want to go into detail about
yeah, that's fine.
that, but it's been very hard on Mariah and Lori and Shay's family, and it's hard to really make sense of or process as yeah. Um, but yeah, COVID's been hard on a lot of people. Since the closure of the supervised consumption site in Lethbridge in, was it 2019, I think is when it closed, or was it 2020? I'm just totally losing track of time.
Yeah.
But when that site closed, the rate of fatal overdoses just like skyrocketed, because people needed that site. That site literally saved lives. They didn't have any fatal overdoses in the time that they were open. And so the United Conservative Party of Alberta has just been so detrimental to the lives of people who live with substance use disorder. They've cut back on so many harm reduction services, funding for harm reduction services. And the supervised consumption site in Lethbridge was one of them. And so um, the closure of that site, compounded with the pandemic and people, being isolated, has just caused the number of deaths to really increase dramatically. That being said, the Bringing the Spirit Home detox is still open, and they've been able to expand their services. So now they actually have aftercare, which is so fantastic. So it's like, with the bad, there's also some positive news.
Mhm.
And so it's really wonderful to know that that facility is still having a really positive impact on the community, like literally saving lives and keeping families together. So many mothers are able to keep their children rather than them going into foster care. And with the aftercare unit, essentially people go through the detox and then stay there until they go to residential treatment. And then after treatment, they're able to come back to the detox and live in the aftercare wing. It's essentially supportive housing within the facility, which is really, really necessary. And I think it's important also to think about harm reduction or housing as harm reduction, especially for Indigenous people who are houseless, because being without a home exacerbates people's dependency on drugs and alcohol for very, very legitimate, understandable reasons.
Yeah, this movie definitely hit me quite hard. This is something obviously I deal with in my family, and obviously living in Winnipeg, it's a big part of the community here as well. And when COVID popped up, I just remember having family meetings and being like, "Does this mean we have no help now? And like, what are we gonna do?" Because for me, I remember being introduced to the idea of harm reduction years ago, and just being absolutely stunned. I felt like my mind blew up when people literally were telling me empathy, because I was very worried about myself and like being in these places and what's going to happen to me. And watching staff that worked in some of these places here, like the Thunderbird House and the Bear Clan and stuff like that here, which you mentioned in the movie, I remember just being like, okay, this isn't something that they really teach. And so this idea that harm reduction is empathy, the meaning of empathy, I was like, it's incredible. And are you finding that you're getting, obviously they're shutting down places in Alberta that are helping with this. Do you find that you're getting a lot of maybe pushback on this idea of harm reduction? Because
Um,
I think that it's not something that people easily understand unless
yeah.
you're in it, unless you're fighting for a family member's life and stuff. It's this idea that if you're not going through it, people don't always understand. Yeah, are you finding you're getting pushback?
Um, not me personally, and not so much with the film, but I know that that it's probably, those are conversations are probably being had that I'm just not privy to. But that was one of the reasons I wanted to make the film, was because this conversation around harm reduction is so contentious, especially within Indigenous communities. Like we are so accustomed to, obviously approaching uh, treatment through an abstinence-based model, and so harm reduction is so often perceived as enabling, and so it's still a conversation that's being had in my community. Like, harm reduction isn't 100% accepted. There's still a lot of resistance in the community, and I understand. I don't personally think that harm reduction is the only answer. I think it's one of many solutions that need to be applied to this road forward, because every single person's journey through recovery is going to be different. Some people may never recover, and then it comes down to that question of, like, well, why not value this person's life if it's not our right to judge someone based on, if they're, going to continue using drugs or alcohol. Like, they still have value as a human being and belong in our communities. And so, yeah, it really comes down to that question of, is someone valuable to our communities regardless of whether or not they use drugs and alcohol? And the answer is yes, absolutely, because they have people who love them and care about them, and they belong regardless of whether they're using or not. And we need to rally around them and support them in whatever way possible. And if that's harm reduction, then it should be harm reduction, because it's evidence based. Harm reduction works, it saves lives. And you can't someone who wants to go into recovery, they need to be in, all of the stars need to align, essentially, for someone to be able to get all of the services that they need to be able to, have a successful recovery. So it's complicated, and we just need to be more supporting and empathetic towards people in those positions.
Um, yeah, the movie is very important. I'm to the point where I'm like, I'm like, you gotta go to Cinematheque and you have to see this movie. I'm like, I can't think of a better way to get people to understand about uh, the harm reduction, and just all the different ways to look at people as people instead of looking them as statistics or the problem or their problems and just all these different things. Um, yeah, I felt a lot of emotions coming out of this. So I just want to thank you for that. It's been a big help for me. I'm definitely going to be making my family watch it, and yeah. So I guess we can end off by, like, what are you up to now? You were talking a little bit about it earlier. Like, I'm like, it's such a heavy material. I'm like, I hope you're doing something on kittens and rainbows right now, because I'm like, that 5 years, that's a long time to kind of live in that situation. And I know that you're such a multi-talented actress you're artist. You also are an actress. We were talking about Night Raiders earlier, and you're working right now. What are you working on?
Well, thank you for all of that. I really appreciate having this conversation with you. It means a lot when I'm able to have these conversations with other Indigenous people, especially in the film world. So, um, yeah, I'm working on an Amazon series called Three Pines in Montreal. It stars Alfred Molina, and it's based on the Louise Penny book series about Inspector. gamache. So yeah, so I'm in Montreal, and I guess it's like a bit closer to kittens than it is to everything else, but it still deals with some heavy subject matter, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with audiences, because there are some Indigenous storylines in the show, and it's kind of cool to know that these issues will be featured on a platform like Amazon. So
Yeah. And so what are you doing on that? Are you acting in it? You're
I'm
directing?
acting.
What do you
I'm acting.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So do you find that you act more often than you direct, or like do you have to be pulled to material to direct?
yeah, I'm going to be doing some television directing in the spring. So this show has been really great, just in terms of being able to spend time on set and watch directors work. Like that's how I started. I started as an actor, and I learned just by watching and being on set, and eventually just started making my own work. So working on this show has been great, just in terms of prepping for directing some television in the spring. So yeah.
So great. Um, yeah, well, thank you so much for all of this, and thank you to Winnipeg Film Group for hosting us today, and for playing the movie. I think movies like this don't always get theater releases in places like Winnipeg. So good on them for seeing the importance of this film and uh, celebrating our Indigenous storytellers. Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
And thanks to everyone who saw the film. Take care.
Okay. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.